There is nothing sadder in gaming than finishing Dark Souls. When the last boss has fallen, you're left looking at the title menu, one that you've seen many times before, but you can't help but wish that somehow, some way, you could open it again for the very first time. Well, come with me. Walk a mile in my shoes. I played all three for the first time in the course of a year, all DLCs included, and I want to share some of my experiences with you. We're talking bosses, NPCs, locations, and some of the strengths and weaknesses of each of the titles. And let's see if we can recapture some of that magic, some of that feeling together. There were a lot of good candidates for favorite boss. Ornstein and Smaug come to mind. The Four Kings fight was great. Gravelord Nito was peak vibes, but I think Artorias really takes the cake for me. First of all, the DLC was very memorable for being quite a difficulty spike from the original game. It kind of had me reconsider my strategy in dealing with bosses and gearing up beforehand. And I think what makes Artorias so great is that he's the perfect combination of interesting lore, challenging mechanics, in an arena that has no gimmicks, no tricks. It's just you and a one-armed knight who was originally the bastion of nobility but has unfortunately fallen prey to the abyss itself. And especially if you've been paying attention and you understand the connection between Artorias and Sif, it really becomes that much more impactful and heartbreaking. One of the biggest takeaways for Artorias is how important it is to continue to be aggressive, especially because this was the first time I'd fought a boss that was so persistent and unrelenting. So, for example, not allowing him to do his Abyss power-up, just getting in there and trying to keep him from activating a new phase was really, truly critical in achieving success in this fight. And up to this point, he, for sure, took the highest number of attempts for me, but in a way that felt very satisfying and fair. All of his attacks are so perfectly balanced and the timing is so precise that any time that I failed, I really felt like it was due to my own shortcomings and not due to any issues with design or environmental hazards or anything. It's just me and what was once the ultimate standard of nobility and honor against the abyss. Artorias is awesome. Fume Knight was a very interesting fight because, first of all, there was an environmental factor to consider. You needed to collect the requisite number of shards to implant in these statues to make sure that Fume Knight would not be able to heal himself. And I believe in this particular iteration of the fight, there were one or two that I had not been able to find at this point. So that essentially cut off about half the arena for me. I needed to keep him on this side in which the statues had been destroyed to make sure that he didn't heal. Another thing that I realized was I was on a definitive pitch count in terms of the number of attacks that I would be able to get in on him. And that's true for a lot of bosses, but even more so for Fume Knight, especially considering the limited health bar that I had at my disposal. You could get maybe 2 strikes in, 3 if you were lucky, but you were always at risk for getting one of his riposte attacks on you, which would leave you with about half your health. Depending on what type of build you used. For me as a dex build, it was pretty critical to conserve stamina, almost as much as it was to remain healthy. But Fume Knight was absolutely incredible, and I'm really proud of how I tackled him here, not allowing him to get to his second phase, which, if you've seen it before, the magic is very tough to handle. He is an absolute beast and was an absolute joy to fight. The best reason that I can give for why Slave Knight Gale is the best Dark Souls 3 boss is he really truly feels like the culmination of your entire journey up to this point. You are truly, literally, at the end of days. This is the last individual who's really in existence, if not at your level. And the fact that he has been consuming, been battling for millennia upon eons, just to do what he can to try to save humanity in his own twisted way, really brings a great layer of depth to this character. And he's just fun to fight, plain and simple. The fact that his arena is so wide and expansive and can go over ruins and dunes and across the ruins of the old world truly feels epic in nature. Not to mention his outstanding soundtrack in the background. And he feels incredibly fair as well. I think that's a common theme among the bosses that I kind of see as my favorites, is that nothing about them seems cheap or unfair. Everything is tightly tuned and designed to test your limits of memory, of attack patterns, and timing. And I think that's really Dark Souls, where Dark Souls shines, is in the humanoid-type bosses. In just allowing you to focus on one singular enemy and truly pit it as a test of wills and skill between you and them. Now, Slave Knight Gale is also very interesting in the sense that he has a lot of variations in his attack patterns, and I believe that is something that is unique to Dark Souls 3, is that the timing of the attacks, the order in which he does it, the cadence actually will change and will be somewhat reactive to how you decide to fight them. And that's something I really truly appreciate in the sense that every attempt that I made against him felt really unique in its own way, and had its own sort of journey that I had to experience. And in the end, Soul of Cinder was, of course, great in its own way, but if you chose, as I did, to do the DLCs before the end of the base game, it definitely did not feel as quite a the same level of challenge in the way that Slave Knight Gale did. But that just goes to show how truly amazing the DLC bosses ended up being, and what an absolute wonderful conclusion to the trilogy that this guy is. And I'll always remember my conclusory duel with him. There may be some choices in this video that you may disagree with, but let's be honest. For least favorite boss for Dark Souls, original Dark Souls, pretty much everyone's choice is going to be Bed of Chaos. I mean, let's be fair. The slide down to the boss arena is pretty fun, but everything after that is just what even is this? From the environmental hazards like the false floors, to the branch attacks, which just seem very nebulous and undodgeable unless you have 100% physical defense type shield. It's just not a great time. I don't think anybody had a great time in this. One of the things that make good bosses in Dark Souls great bosses is that there's some element of learning or skill or personal growth that you experience to the point that you finally overcome the challenge. For Bed of Chaos, what exactly is that path of growth? I mean, let's think about it. For the Taurus Demon, you learn to sort of survey your environment and learn to be attentive to everything around you that may give you a leg up. For the Bell Gargoyles, you learn to level up your weapon, and maybe you need to farm a little bit before you're ready to take on another challenge. What exactly am I supposed to learn that's going to help me in this fight? Persistence, I guess, and not giving up, not turning hollow. I guess there's that. But I appreciate what they were trying to do. again, like, I understand that they were trying to make this very unique and something that made you actually have to consider your environment and understand what exactly you needed to do to solve the puzzle. But to me, a boss shouldn't really be a puzzle. It should be a test of skill first and foremost, or it should be an environmental hazard that you understand how to overcome over time, and this just felt like none of those. So there we go. We squashed the bug, down for the count, and at the end, instead of triumph, you're just left with... what? Everyone knows group bosses are pretty poor generally in Dark Souls. And here we are, the Royal Rat Vanguard. Find a needle in a haystack, or find a rat in a swarm. There he is. Once you lock onto him, you just keep on locking on. I have to admit, it took me a second to figure out exactly what was going on, but once I did, pretty underwhelming. I'm kind of surprised that this was approved as an actual boss, because there we go. Quickest boss fight you'll ever see. Surprise, we have another group boss fight here. And let's be clear, Prowling Magus and Congregation in Dark Souls 2 was also a candidate for the previous iteration. But I have to say, as group fights go, Deacons of the Deep is probably is about as good as you're going to get. And your weapon choice probably has a major impact on how good or bad of a time you're going to have here, right? If you're a single fire damage type of fighter, let's say like a rapier or something of that ilk, things are probably not going to go as well for you, right? You're probably not going to be able to cut a swath through the crowd right there to get to the juicy cleric there in the middle. But I have to say, the fact that the Deacons of the Deep is the worst fight in Dark Souls 3 is actually really a great testament to the quality of bosses. Because even though the mechanics of the boss are not the best, there's, still a small element of danger, especially when you get to the final phase in which your health starts being drained and there's a curse build up and such. But the environment is good. The altar is very cinematic and feels appropriate for the large cathedral that you've gone into. But again, it's not truly difficult. It's more just a matter of time and continually orbiting the pack of enemies as the moon orbits the Earth, and just trying to get to that individual there in the middle. So, I mean, not much else to say. It was fine, could be worse, but ultimately pretty forgettable for an otherwise good complement of bosses in Dark Souls 3.
A visitor, have we? Thou must be the one who freed Artorias. Old friend he was. Thanks to thee, he left this world with honor intact.
Hawkeye doesn't get much screen time, but he certainly makes a giant of an impression. Sitting up here in the DLC, I couldn't help but wonder what his history was, and wish that I could have seen more of his adventures with Artorias.
Good. What is bravery without a dash of recklessness? I've taken a liking to thee, and I owe thee much for thy service to Artorias. Now, watch, and see how Goth hunts dragon.
Goth is in a very interesting position in which he is one of the few NPCs who actually provides tangible benefit. A lot of NPCs provide support, supplies, magic, the ability to level up, but Hawkeye doesn't need any of that. He jumps in head first, arrow first, you might even say, and definitively helps us bring down the absolute menace, which is Calamite, and he does so in one of the best cutscenes in the trilogy. And because of that, because of his impact, his history, he is probably my favorite in original Dark Souls.
Yes. The truest shot was never loosed. That back will be grounded for a good spell. The rest is in thine hands.
Emerald Herald is not only the best NPC in Dark Souls 2, she's also the best hub world maiden of the whole trilogy. I would say that she is superior to either of the Firekeepers in the sense that she really has a more distinct personality. I think the mystery and the power that she conveys really shows, not only in the conversations that you can have with her, but also the fact that she appears regularly along your journey. Not only here in beautiful Majula, but also in the Dragon Eyrie and close to the end when you're getting ready to fight Nashandra, the Queen of Darkness, and a couple other points along the way as well. But the serenity, the confidence, and the power which she conveys, not to mention some of the backstory in terms of her journey that you can uncover along the way, I think lend her to be really memorable.
Bearer of the curse, seek the king, lest this land...
You are a saint. Once again, you are my valiant savior. I, Siegward of Katarina, express my deepest gratitude.
Siegward is a bright spot of hope and camaraderie in a world so overcome by darkness. And he is easily, for me, and I'm sure for many of you, the best NPC in Dark Souls 3. His quests are a little circuitous at times and definitely take some persistence and understanding, but just like the man himself, who would never quit, never surrender, neither do we in helping out our good friend in here. And when it comes time for his big show-stopping scene, the gloves are truly off.
Yom, old friend. I, Siegward of the Knights of Katarina, have come to uphold my promise.
He's a rare NPC in which he has a purpose. He doesn't seem to have any hidden agenda. What you see is what you got. And the way he absolutely deals with Yorm for you, dealing body blow after body blow while all you really have to do is survive, is one of the truly most impressive scenes that an NPC has given me experience with.
You are a true friend. Best of luck with your duty.
His story ends about as well as you could hope for, but his legacy in our heart truly lives on. In Orlando, by far the most spectacular location in Dark Souls. Up until this point in the game, you're dealing with catacombs, ruins, the old broken down vestiges of a former world, but you come over that wall and it truly feels like you're stepping into a brand new, living, breathing city. And that's before you even going into the castle itself and you experience knights, the vestiges of a last royal dynasty, desperate to hold on to whatever power it can sustain. Not to mention a couple friendly faces you meet along the way, Siegmeyer of Katarina for one, as well as the giant blacksmith. And to top it all off, kind of the cherry on this ice cream sundae of amazingness, Ornstein and Smaug, one of the best boss fights, one of the most atmospheric ones as well. Really just to seal the deal that this is kind of the capstone of your early Dark Souls journey. Oh yeah, and also a little bit of what you might call a happy ending. Who doesn't love a good pirate-themed location? I think this is the best Dark Souls 2 location because everything really works. The mechanics of lighting the beacons to keep away the monsters, the good enemy variety, the vibes of a massive underground dock cavern just really work for me. Not to mention the fun people you meet along the way.
I, Gavlan. Gavlan will, Gavlan deal.
What this really did for me is it kind of made me wish we had a whole Dark Souls or Souls-like game predicated around ship-based combat and boarding, and how fun would that be? But as it stands, I have to be content with what we get here, not only clearing out the pirates on the upper deck down here, but also the Flexile sentry down in the hold. And as far as majestic exits, exiting with style, well, No Man's Wharf has got to be right up there with the best of them. Who knew that spooky libraries could be so much fun? I think that there is a fantastic variety of enemies here, from the Crystal Sage themselves to the spooky candleheads, the thralls, the gross ghostly arms that try to grab you out through bookcases, and then the whole mechanic of dipping your head in candle wax is weird and spooky in the best kind of way. And then once you figure out what it does, namely shield you from curse, definitely makes it worth it. But I think this is just really well done. This aesthetic, this ruined repository of knowledge that's still being used in some kind of semi-cult-like way. I don't know, it really does it for me. The huge stack of books, which lets you imagine what kind of vast lost knowledge could be possibly found in here, and then finally making it to the top and sort of looking down on everything that you've gone through so far. I think this has to be one of the best designed and most memorable levels in Dark Souls 3. I can't see anything. How is this a fun mechanic? Honestly, Tomb of the Giants made me rage like none other. Just I'm learning how to dodge. I'm learning how to make an assessment of enemies based on the clues in the environment around me. And then this comes and takes everything away from me. And yes, I know that you can get the lantern or the little sunlight crown which removes that mechanic. But still, I feel like introducing a problem and then selling you the solution for it is just a cheap way to make a level. Like, don't get me wrong, Nito the Gravelord is a great way to end what is an absolutely miserable area, but even he can't make up for what an absolute grind and just felt like a very anti-fun area. Well, the small redeeming qualities, I guess, besides Nito, is that little overlook you could see right here where you can view the demon ruins where you were, and then of course meeting Patches for the first time is pretty fun, I guess. But I just had a bad time, man. Enough said. It's a shame that an area as beautiful as the Shrine of Amana has to be so absolutely miserable. And the fact is, there's just too many negative effects happening simultaneously. First, you've got mages who fire auto-guiding missiles straight at you as you're trying to deal with crawling zombie fellas. Not to mention, big old stone giants that pack a serious punch. And on top of all of that, you have to watch exactly where you're going because there's environmental hazards, because the water hides some serious drop-offs that will quickly end whatever progress that you've made. Again, like, it's really too bad. Like, the music going on in the background is the nameless song from the credits of Dark Souls 1 that is slightly modified to show that it's been passed down from generation to generation to where you are now. And then, of course, as you get closer to the exit, you gotta fight these archmages with more auto-targeting missiles and stamina for days, and I don't know. By the time I was done, I was glad to see the back of this area. You could take my health, just don't take my health bar, man. These jailers here in Irithyll Dungeon are just the worst. They're not fun, they're aggravating, you gotta retreat every so often to let your health bar come back. And they just feel like a giant hassle. Oh yeah, and there's rats and tight corridors you can't exactly dodge how you'd like to. And on top of that, if that wasn't bad enough, you got huge basilisk trap where you're lucky if you can escape intact in an area where there is surprisingly no intermediate bonfire to save your progress. I know you can take the elevator back up to the first one, but there is a lot of stuff in between that will quickly stymie your progress if you are not thorough in finding those shortcuts back to the surface. And then when you get to this main room here with the mega posse of jailers, I don't know, you're just kind of reduced to picking them off one by one, which is pretty cheesy and not fun. Manus was an absolute menace. In a lot of ways. First of all, he just takes forever to fight. This fight took about 6 minutes, so the footage you're seeing here is cut in half because it just took so long to whittle him down. And part of that is just me exercising an overabundance of caution and healing. And Manus was the first boss that I can recall in my Let's Play that I ended up having to do the commentary retroactively. I actually carved out almost an entire day just to fight this guy. And after a while, I didn't have much to say because I was getting into the high 30s of attempts. And he is relentless. He is an absolute sack of hit points. But it really got me considering, as a Dark Souls newbie, what it meant to properly equip yourself based on the boss. So, as you can see here, I've equipped myself with the Grass Crest Shield to give myself an extra little dex boost. I went and picked up a bunch of extra Estus shards so that I would be fully equipped from a healing perspective. Tried a lot of different combinations of armor types and gloves and helmets and such just to give me that perfect edge. And even that still felt like it was cold comfort to deal with this guy. Another issue is that from a depth perspective, it's kind of hard to tell sometimes because of the pervasive darkness whether or not you're connecting. And I'm sure that depends a great deal whether you're wielding an axe like me or a spear or a hammer, but it is just very tough to see what exactly you're hitting. The other thing is that the arena is surrounded by a little force field, so as you're backing up and dodging and retreating from the impending attacks, a lot of my attempts ended with me up against the wall, not being, spatially aware of where I was ending up. So this was truly a battle in which not only did I have to have impeccable timing, an excellent memory of the attack pattern, but also have great spatial awareness of where exactly I was. But in the end, I think this made just about everything that came after it feel like a piece of cake. Not only the rest of the Dark Souls base game and DLCs itself, but to a certain extent, I feel like this set me up really well for Dark Souls 2. And until I got to the DLCs of Dark Souls 2 itself, I don't think I faced a challenge as tough as this guy. What a marathon. So, the candidacy for hardest boss in Dark Souls 2 definitely was a toss-up between Sir Elan and Fume Knight. Ultimately, I chose Sir Elan as the hardest for one very important reason, which was kind of pervasive in Dark Souls 2, that being the run-up to this guy. If you're familiar with the run-up, you know that you've got to run past fire lizards, relentless Elan Knights, all manner of magical chicanery, and by the time you finally reach this guy, ready for another attempt, you're already on the back foot. And then stepping into this guy's antechamber with his immaculately polished floors, his highly precise attacks, takes things to a whole nother level. I have to say, though, he was probably one of the most complete bosses in terms of style, arena, soundtrack. I would have to say Sauron probably has the best theme in Dark Souls 2. Very cinematic, but he is an absolute menace with his especially his forward sprinting slashing attack. You have to be extremely precise in your diagonal roll. You can always dodge backwards, but that will often put you out of a position to even land any hits on him, and so that is often not the most optimal decision to take. Fortunately, I mean, one of the ways that you can beat him, as for many Dark Souls 2 bosses, is just out healing him, plain and simple. I wish I could say that I was perfectly attuned and I was able to dance around his attacks with minimal effort, but I think a big part of the way that I ultimately beat him was just tanking a lot of the hits and just out healing, which, you know, is a valid strategy in itself. Not to mention, again, this is a situation in which I had to throw on a little bit of stamina enhancement, to wit the shield, which I needed every bit of it. Again, this is a boss that attacks so quickly that you really need to conserve your stamina in a big way just to be in a position to land the probably max 2 hits, even as a dex build. Or as a katana build, just to put any kind of hurting on this guy. He also does a great job of punishing heals. There's a number of times you could probably see here in which I'm just in a very poor position to heal, but I don't feel like I have much other recourse. So understanding his timings and the windows in which you might have to either get an attack off or to grab some healing, that is really, truly critical to taking out this guy. But ultimately, I mean, one of the best armor sets in the game. I think I went out and got his set almost immediately out of respect. Truly a worthy opponent and so memorable. One of the most challenging things about Dark Souls 3 bosses is that by the time it came out, there had been, well, 2 previous Dark Souls, and the From Software's experience with how players dealt with the first 2 iterations of Dark Souls greatly informed how they designed these. And by that I'm specifically referring to the variations in timing and rhythm. The Nameless King, unlike just about any other Dark Souls 3 boss, with the possible exception of Pontiff Sulivan, really messes with your timing. So if you are a spastic roller and dodger, as I unfortunately found myself to be in many an undisciplined moment, you will get absolutely punished. By the way, I should mention, the footage that you're seeing right now, I cut out the entire first phase in which he rides a dragon, and it's very challenging sometimes to lock on and see what exactly it is you're fighting. So by the time you get to this second phase, which is challenging in itself, you may already be down to, I don't know, I think on average I was down to about half to 2/3 of my healing. But persistence and patience, just like many bosses, ended up being the key. And also not being afraid to stick close to him in a lot of situations. It's tough because the way that he is able to conduct his attacks, he truly has a 360-degree reach. For a lot of Dark Souls bosses, the prevailing wisdom is just hug their left leg and circle around them and profit. But the way he's able to wield his weapon really kind of precludes your traditional approach in that specific strategy. So you always have to have your head on a swivel, and even if you do dodge to his left and kind of circle around, you have to be ready to move backwards or find exactly where the iframes will get you in terms of not being caught by his stabbing attacks and just getting to the side. I will say, one of the redeeming features for this guy, though, is that his bonfire is right up against his fog wall. So I know that's cold comfort to me in my 25th attempt, as it may have been for some of you. But this guy challenged me probably more than any other in Dark Souls 3, and so beating him was a massive achievement for me. So let's do some final analysis, stacking the trilogy entries against each other. The first Dark Souls was an amazing welcome into what was a truly unique world that I had never experienced before, and it had me hooked right away. One of the things that I noticed during my early Let's Play entries was how interconnected the level design was, and that really just added an extra element of excitement in exploration. The fact that any elevator or secret passage or something right around the corner could either A, lead me somewhere new and exciting that could very well kill me, or it could lead me back to Firelink Shrine, which in a lot of ways was almost a more exciting proposition. On the downside, I would say that everything after Anor Londo just kind of paled in comparison to the first half. Not to say that it was bad by any means. I think the DLC, it was very strong, at least the bosses themselves were, but the same excitement of exploration and innovation was not quite there in the second half. Dark Souls 2, in my opinion, actually improved on a lot of its predecessors' already amazing groundwork. First of all, I would say that the Fashion Souls, the all-important armor and weapon options for your character, were greatly improved in the sequel. I had a lot of fun trying out a decent variety of different combinations that all felt very unique and really helped me gain an extra element of interest in bosses in the sense that I had to really kit myself out very precisely based on what I wanted to achieve. But speaking of bosses, on the other hand, Dark Souls 2 is notorious for its absolutely terrible boss runbacks. Two examples off the top of my head: Blue Smelter Demon and Sura Elan, two DLC bosses, absolutely dreadful, and unfortunately a lot of the enjoyment of the bosses was kind of detracted from what an absolute nightmare it was to even reach them to make my attempts. Dark Souls 3 really brought things home in an immensely satisfying way. Everything from the art design to the NPC quests to the strongest soundtrack out of the three, I would say, and especially its boss design. I can't think of a single fight that was not fun. There were some that were what I would say maybe mediocre, but none outright bad, and some of the top tier fights that you're going to get, like Pontiff Sullivan, Slave Knight Gale, Sister Frida, absolutely amazing. The one drawback I would say is that it's a very linear game, unlike the kind of hub and spoke system of Majula in Dark Souls 2 or the interconnected labyrinth of Dark Souls 1. It just feels like it's very railroady and scripted in the way that you kind of have to go, but that doesn't detract from an otherwise amazing entry in the series. With all that being said, and with the caveat that there's not a bad game among them, here's my final ranking, with Dark Souls 3 taking the top billing. It's funny, as I was making this video, I didn't realize how nostalgic I would already feel about looking back on this series, but it really sticks with you, doesn't it? Whether it's a favorite NPC or a boss, a location, a piece of music, there's something really intangible and ineffable about these games, works of art really, that you can't quite describe, but really makes such an impact on people, and I absolutely love it. I would love to know how your experiences went. Do you agree with the assessments I've made? Disagree? Please drop your comments below, and don't forget to leave a like for your old Chosen Undead, Bearer of the Curse, or Ashen One, as you see fit. Thank you so much for watching, you guys. Really appreciate it, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.